Good evening. Hello, everybody. Right, so good evening. I'm Councillor Higson, the Chair of the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services Policy Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the meeting this evening. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? Okay, I ask so that people at the meeting will know that this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies? Yes.
Councillor Reid is Parfit, sorry. She's running late. She's on her way. So yeah.
Item 2, any substitute members? Can't see any. Okay. Item 3, there are no urgent items. Item 4, are there any visiting members? I can't see any. Item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? Okay, no, thank you. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? Nope. Okay, item 7, to consider that all items are taken in public. So I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8, are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? So minutes in your packs. Nope. Okay, so I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of November 2025 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Forward plans, item 9. Are there any comments on the forward plan, or do any cabinet members wish to make any comments? Councillor Summersgill.
Just to point out, sorry, on page 8, fees and charges is under my lead member and not the cabinet member for climate transition.
Thank you. That will be amended. Good evening. So, just need to do the house sitting stuff, which is about disclosures. Are there any disclosures? Any lobbying? Okay, thank you. Okay, so item number 10. So this is going to be introduced by Councillor Summersgill. This is the half-yearly performance KPI update.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides a mid-year performance update for the Council for the first half of this financial year and focuses on the key performance indicators relating to the remit of this committee. Just remind members that the Council presents KPI data on the Council's website via the interactive dashboard, which is refreshed each month where monthly data exists and allows members of the public to track a performance position more frequently, and Council members with more in-depth trends. And the contents of this report of the 20 KPIs that fall under this pack, 7 had a half-yearly target assigned to them, and of these 7, 3 have met their targets in the first half of the year. Of the KPIs to miss their targets, 3 of them have missed them by more than 10% margin and 1 by less than 10%. 6 of the 7 improved compared to the previous 6 months, while half of them showed improvement compared to the same period in the previous year. And to be a bit specific, the environmental services outcomes, litter and detritus levels decreased due to enhanced cleaning, but fly tipping incidents have increased in severity and in clearance times. So we've prompted further enforcement efforts. And recycling rates fell below targets, mainly because of reduced garden waste during the dry summer period. Under corporate complaints, there's a rise in escalated complaints, and with 20% of stage 1 complaints moving to stage 2, which led to improved complaint handling processes coming in. And council tax collection has narrowly missed its target, although reminder notices have increased slightly as recovery efforts continue.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thought this is quite I like the way the report's laid out with comments, but I've got just a couple of points actually. So on page 23, I was interested to hear what the Cabinet member said, because obviously the number of incidences of fly tipping seems to have gone down compared to previous years, but then, as you were saying, all the other indices there would imply that the workload's going up. So I just wondered if we had any idea whether perhaps people aren't reporting so many, or quite why. It's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? I mean, we're all probably aware of incidences of fly tipping haven't reduced. So that's my first question. The second one was on page 25, which is a fairly simple request. It's that last one. It's the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting. I just wondered if in future we could split out the garden waste from what's being sent for reuse and recycling. Obviously, garden waste is done under a different sort of, well, it's a contract, isn't it? Because each of us pay individually for it. But clearly, it's much more seasonal and reliant on the weather, whereas general recycling and reuse, one would assume it tends to, apart from Christmas, be relatively stable. So it'd just be useful to understand the difference there. Because one would hope if you do that, that our recycling rates, if anything, are perhaps very, very slowly, but gradually, improving. And then the last one was actually the information around this information governance. And I know there's sort of some indication there that they wondered if it's to do with, it says there, isn't it, policy decisions and service delivery in areas with high engagement. But just perhaps if, the officers or the Cabinet member could just, look behind that a bit further, because to see us in, the target at 10% and the actual at 20.5%, there must be something significant driving that sort of change, because, complaints normally, I would have thought, tend to be a relatively static thing. So, what would be interesting to understand what led to the spike. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, Council Member for Environment Services here might have more information, but I will pass the officer in a minute. I had a question to ask him because we were starting the new charging system on garden waste bins, as to whether we were actually taking less in because we were collecting bins that we shouldn't have been before. So there may be a subtext to the garden waste numbers, which I haven't bottomed out yet.
Hi. So in regards to the fly tipping, what I understand the issue is the complexity of the fly tipping, and that takes longer to deal with it because it requires specialist support and equipment to deal with it. But obviously, members, if you want to know more detail about that than I can offer, we can always ask for some information to be circulated or brought to a future pack. In regards to the additional information on the garden waste, always happy to provide additional information in these reports or ad hoc. So I'll talk to the team about adding that information into the next report. And then in regards to complaints, that falls within my remit as Head of Service. So we produce twice a year a beautiful report which goes to AGS. So I encourage you all to go and read it. It's a very interesting read. It's not that the performance has dropped. We maintain a target of 10% because we hold ourselves to a high standards in terms of trying to ensure that all complaints are dealt with in time, and that the first point of complaint, the issue is resolved and doesn't require to come to stage 2. We are missing that, and there are a number of reasons. 1, that there are places where we are not providing quite enough information or explanation for residents, so making sure that when managers or heads of service do complete their response, that it is the explanation is as easy to understand as possible, and we don't include too much technical information, or we do in an easy to plain English way of explaining it, that we address each part of the complaint, including the nuances. And sometimes that can get missed. There are a high volume of complaints, as well as FOIs and EIRs that we process as a council, and managers are dealing with quite a heavy load. And then secondly, it's can be frustrating, but there are points of issue that then get raised by the stage 1 complaint, that the resident then comes back and wants a further explanation or more detail based upon that. There are also a number of complaints that we just simply cannot resolve at stage 1. Residents are just not happy, and they want that second point of review by someone objective from the team, and stage 2 complaints are reviewed by the information governance team, so it does provide a objective second point, and they do have to go through that stage 2 in order they want to raise the complaint with the local government ombudsman, and some residents do want to take it external to the council. So I'd say those were the 3 core reasons, but we do that intensive analysis that you requested in the AGS reports twice a year, so you can see the information from that. I think it went in September, October last year, and then it's reviewed quarterly by the Information Governance Board, which is an internal officer group. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Anna. And actually, I suppose I should just declare an interest, because I asked the Chief Executive a question the other day, a very detailed one, and she said the best way to get that answered for me was to actually put it through this sort of stage 1 complaints process. So, yeah, I better just declare that. It was a question to do with HMOs, nothing to do with service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anna. That was a really good explanation of the complaints procedure there, because my question was actually around complaints, and you've answered a lot of it. I just wondered what the sort of what sort of things that people were complaining about. Is there like a common theme? And I just then wondered, Councillor Summerskill said that additional measures had been put in place, and I just wondered what those were. And is the sort of moving to stage 2, is it like a timing issue, or is it just sometimes, as you were saying, like just the nuance of residents not particularly understanding the answer they've been given, so a more simplified answer was required? And I did have another question as well. No, because it's on a separate topic.
Okay, so in terms of what we do, we constantly do a review process to see what's happening. So like I said, it goes to Information Governance Board quarterly, and at that point we'll run through what's happening in the last quarter in terms of response rates and so on, and then we'll look for common themes, or if there's particular issues that are coming up at that point. So it may be something like winter mist bins, or there might have been some events going on like the River Festival or some, and that might lead to a common theme and a suggested way that we might be handling those complaints. And then we also look for things like there might be some additional training in plain English writing, for example, that may be required by a team or a group of people, and then we'll try and address those. So we kind of do a regular cycle quarterly of looking at that. As we say in the report, there isn't any one particular reason that stands out, and at the moment as it stands, and I think we kind of are putting it down to a general air of dissatisfaction, and it's not comfortable to say, but a general lack of trust in the council and the council's responses on some issues, that there might be something behind a decision made, for example, and trying to seek to challenge something that doesn't feel comfortable for the resident, but for us would be in line with our processes, if that makes sense. So there's a disparity between how the resident may be feeling about an issue and the way in that we're addressing it in terms of our policies and procedures, or indeed legislation. Did that cover all of the points?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's brilliant, thank you. And the second question I had was around the council tax. You said that we'd missed the collection rate targets, was it? And I know we're obviously moving on to the council tax reduction scheme later on in the agenda, so that might be the place to discuss it. But I was just again wondering, is that anything out of what we might expect? Is it cost of living? Are we making contact and trying to find a common theme in that area as well?
Yes, if I...
Oh, sorry.
There is a comment maybe coming, but there's been a slight increase in the number of accounts being sent a reminder, and also in those moving into a recovery process. So I presume that's something to do with the cost of living. And also there's support provided for those on a low income who are struggling to pay. So it is at the lesser income end that we're getting some of those problems. But it's a very marginal missing of the target, but it is obviously, perhaps some people try to put off paying until the final demand comes. I don't know.
Thank you. It seems to get harder every year, and I think since the social care precept came in, the amount of council taxes increased significantly that people have to pay. There's been a 5% rise year on year on year, and then going through COVID, and now the cost of living increase. People are struggling to pay, really. I also think whatever the valuation office agency may say, properties get banded at a slightly higher bands now. All new properties have a downstairs toilet. That has given the valuation office a reason to put them up a band, so we don't get any new properties coming in as a band A now, whereas as it reverts back to the value at 1992, a small property should still, really a flat should go into band A, but they will all start at band B, so everybody who goes into a new property is paying slightly more. And then we've also had the mortgage increases, the percentage rises, so people that took on mortgages when the interest rates were very low and may have bought a bigger property because they were able to because of that, now may be struggling to pay the council tax on top of it. And if you've got a larger property, we're up to over £4,000 for some, so if people are suddenly not working. Yeah. It all makes it a struggle, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Cooch.
Thank you. I was just wondering if I could come back on Anna's point about bringing a report on fly tipping. It was something I was going to ask if the committee had the appetite for, either a briefing or a report to this committee, just due to the targets and also selfishly because it's an issue in my ward. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would obviously have to, I can't speak on behalf of the head of service responsible for that area, but very happy to feed that back.
That's better. I think that'd be a really good idea. So I'll have a chat with Clive, and because I'd like to know some detail. We've got 5 people being prosecuted going through the courts, and it's clearly working. They're working hard. We've obviously got all that investment. We've got the lots of drones. So yeah, it'd be good to get some real detail in the public domain, wouldn't it? So I'll talk to Clive.
On advice, you could ask for a briefing note if you propose and second it.
I guess it's whether we want a briefing note or a report to committee. Can I ask for a report to committee?
Apparently we can't, but we can ask for a briefing note. It's outside of the remit of the committee to ask for a report, but but it's okay to ask for a briefing note.
I'll propose to ask for a briefing note then.
We have a proposal and we have a seconder. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. The remainder of the report, page 12, is for noting. So note the performance position at the end of the first half of 25-26, including any actions being taken to improve the positions. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So, item number 11. This is the quarter finance update report. This is also going to be introduced by Councillor Summersgill.
Thank you. Yes, as before, this covers the first half of the year up to the end of September. That's right, yep. And I'm pleased to note and remind that we did produce a balanced budget for this year on both revenue and capital, and we're now expecting a favourable variance of 197,000 projected for the current financial year, which is an improvement on the break-even position that my predecessor projected at quarter one stage. And in the position for this pack is a year-end outturn position is going to be an underspend of 662,000 in expectation. The two biggest variances across the council are favourable variance in investment income, which I believe we've spoken about before, of about £500,000 in our favour, and a adverse one on temporary accommodation, which is 280,000 expected. The projected variance for temporary accommodation has fallen since the last quarter because the numbers in temporary accommodation have now fallen slightly, but it remains to be seen whether this trend will be sustained. We're hopeful it is, but we're not banking on it in our assessment. And in capital terms, some capital expenditure is projected to slip into the next financial year, arising from a reprofiling of the capital budget, and in the case of the budget of 1.4 million for corporate property acquisitions, we have found no suitable opportunities, so that has not been expended this year. The report also deals with debt collection and treasury management. Debt collection for council tax, as we've mentioned earlier, is slightly behind target, but debt collection for business rates is ahead of target. And the treasury management position remains comfortable with cash balances of 30 million as at the end of September.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. I found this reasonably easy to follow, but I've got a couple of questions, and I suppose, and a couple of points. So my first point was really around housing, which you referred to, because obviously on page 44, it shows the forecast £280,000 overspend for the year. And I do remember when we were discussing the budget in various forums that I said it would be unlikely for us to achieve the budget we set. Year on year, probably for the last decade, we've always overspent on that budget, even though we tend to adjust it up the following year. It's down to pressures beyond us. I mean, it's no different this year. We're forecasting £280,000. So I would really ask the Cabinet member, when we start looking at next year's budget, to bear in mind the fact that we're predicting an overspend this year. Because if we don't adjust the following year budget up to allow for that, and also the predicted increase is almost never going to be in homelessness, we will end up having the same overspend coming through, which luckily this year, because of our delay in the capital programme and the interest rates, we've generated underspends or additional income from that, which helps offset it. But if we hadn't have had those things, this would be coming through to our bottom line. My next point is around the Archbishop's Palace. Now, looking at members of the committee, I mean, Lottie, Tom and Stan probably can remember back to when the Archbishop's Palace first started coming up on agendas, probably about 5 years ago, or whenever it was. KCT told us they were going to surrender the lease. We were told that it was imperative to get the building re-let out for an alternative purpose, because if we didn't, it would be costing us money to keep that historic building empty. And as we see again, we've had another year when it's sat there empty, leading to £170,000 of expenditure on it, but obviously no income. Now, I'm a bit trying to understand, because the two comments we have on revenue and capital almost are counterintuitive. Excuse me. So on revenue, we're told on page 43 in the variance analysis that we're about to... An agreement for lease has been signed with a new tenant occupying from next year. But then when we go and look at the capital explanation on page 49, the fact that we're £1,615,000 carry forward because we haven't spent the money, we're told there progress on this project has been slower than anticipated, so the majority of the costs are now likely to be incurred in 2026-27. Well, if we're expecting someone to have signed a lease to actually operate the building, presumably from early in 2026-27, but the capital works for them to actually operate it aren't planned now until 26-27, one of those statements would seem to me not to hold much water. And I would imagine, obviously, if the capital slipped, whether there's a licence signed or not, no one's going to be in a situation to take occupation of it. It's has slipped for about 3 or 4 years now. And we're looking at the oldest building in the borough we own, and one of the oldest there is in the borough, sitting there empty year on year rather than being brought into use. So that's my second point. My next two are linked. So central services to the public, £500,000 under, which is to do with the fact that we're sitting on millions of pounds of cash because we're not spending the capital, and that's giving us interest, which is good because it offsets all these other overspends. But when we look at the capital, we're £15 million light on what we had expected to spend on capital this year, which is a whopping 29%. Now, something must be, typically going wrong. I mean, you read all the individual variances, but are we just not resourcing those areas sufficiently? Aren't we focusing? Because almost all our big capital projects have major slippage, and a big worry of that is not so much that you might spend it all next year, but if next year we have the same thing with slippage, we won't spend it at all. Because after the next financial year, the government will bring in the embargo with local government reorganisation, and the first thing which gets stopped is capital. So unless we can have, and I'm not saying tonight, but over the budget process, some assurance from the officers that the figures we put in our capital are going to be spent in that last financial year we can do capital expenditure, then we need to really have a consideration on what we're doing with our finances, because prior to local government reorganisation it would have been okay if we slipped a year or so. It's not necessarily unusual, but for £15 million of slippage, which is half our revenue budget in value, our net revenue budget, is massive. So those are my points on this.
Thank you. So go to the Archbishop's Palace point. Where a lease has been signed with the new tenant occupying from next year, as it says there. I imagine next year starts at the start of the financial year, and there are several things to be done once the lease has been signed, and I know there are surveys going on and at the moment there. So I imagine that's part of it, is you can't occupy until, especially the heritage nature of it, that any remedial works, any changes for use have to be approved and approved for planning as well. So I think what you're seeing there is not a mismatch between the 2 years. It's a point that the income will be starting in the next financial year, not this one. The second point on...
I just check one point, because the whole point was it's going to be leased out for as a wedding venue. Now, the bulk, I do remember when this report originally came up to spend this capital programme, is on catering facilities and so on, and actually making sure the building can be used as a wedding venue. Now, I'm just trying to understand in my head, yes, you might have signed the licence or the lease with the new operator. However, presumably, if we haven't spent the capital, there's no catering facilities there. And there's, not the ability to put on weddings. So I cannot see how from day one we're going to start to achieve our income. And the income target's clearly the 170,000 we're running short on now. So what I'm saying is that do make sure when you do the budget, you really think when are these works going to be completed, so we don't assume we're going to be getting income when the building's enclosing scaffolding, building work's going on. Because you can't run a wedding. Well, I suppose you could do. I don't think many people want to go to a wedding venue when there's half the building's not ready.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that's a question, but...
I can confirm what the Cabinet member has said, which is that the occupation will commence in the next financial year. There are works that need to be undertaken in advance of that, and the discussions that have been taking place with the prospective tenant have been around the design of the works that need to be carried out. From our point of view, we weren't going to commit to the capital expenditure until the tenant had signed on the dotted line. Equally, from their point of view, they wanted to make sure that they had agreement with us on the specifications such that the work we do will meet their requirements when they open the venue. And a lot of members here will be aware of the history of Archbishop's Palace. As you all know, it hasn't been easy to find a suitable tenant because the building it's not a straightforward one in which to drop this kind of operation. There continue to be issues. First of all, we do need to get planning permission for the works that we want to undertake, but we're not doing anything radical, and there have been discussions with Historic England, so we've done everything we can to make sure that the works will get through planning, and then early next year the actual physical works on the site will start with a view to later in 2026 the property being handed over to the tenant.
Look, Sarge, can I just clarify? So yes, I understand all what you've just said, but the fact that all those works, the physical works, are going to take place as we're told on capital and so on, if they need planning permission in the next financial year, one assumes that this poor licensee who's taken on the building isn't going to be expected to be paying us £170,000 of rent from day one when they can't use the building because none of these works have been done. That's what I'm just trying to get to the point, so that when we do the budget, we don't put in £170,000 of income, and then lo and behold, at half year, we suddenly find we're short by £100,000. Because money is tight, and we need to understand these things. And it just, to me, I'm really concerned when we look at the budget that Archbishop's Palace will be showing unrealistic figures.
Okay, we'll take that note when looking at the budget, which we're doing tomorrow. first stages of that. Your comment about the contract, the money sitting in the bank being waiting to be expended next year, I'm not sure the exact dates, but Springfield and the sorting office will require that expenditure before any government reorganisation date that we are aware of. But I can only say that those things are moving along, and that's where the major expenditures will occur in the next financial year from capital.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Paul made a number of, Councillor Harper made lots of good points about making sure that there is enough funds for the Archbishop's Palace. I wanted to ask about, on page 48, I have said in previous meetings about budget and finances not to be in a situation where we're spending lots on software and PC replacement, considering the authority is going to be dissolved and changed into a new authority. So I'm just sort of a bit concerned that there's £389,000 on software and PC replacement, and I'm just wondering, like, what are we actually, what's being replaced, what bit of software is being purchased, those sorts of things. I'd like a bit of detail on that, if that's right.
We do have a substantial programme of investment in IT, and it's important that we maintain the capability of the authority to deliver services, which means having current IT right up to the point of local government reorganisation. Equally, it would be irresponsible of us to hand over to a new authority an estate, and I mean, it's, I think, of property in particular, because it's my area of responsibility, but the same applies to IT. We don't want to be handing over to a new authority a set of assets which is broken and not functional. We want to maintain the standard of the assets. So we're not advancing any expenditure, but we are maintaining the equipment to make sure that it's up to date and fit for purpose.
Thank you. Councillor Cooch.
Thank you. I was going to say, having burnt through many a council laptop, I'm glad that they're being upgraded and replaced. I was also going to ask about Archbishop's Palace, but obviously that's been covered, but I was wondering if we could be pointed towards any briefing notes or papers that have gone to this committee or previous, just because it seems to come up a lot in this committee. I was also wondering on page 43 about the drainage issues at the depot. It's quite a significant increase in maintenance costs, and if anything has been learned that could have been done sooner to prevent that spend. And then also on page 14.9, if we could have some more information about the flood action plan spend and why there's no other plans to spend the balance of this budget. Thank you.
Yes, I can. Well, drainage issues is probably one of mine. But I understand from the depot that there was an undersized pipe that kept causing flooding, and that had to be replaced or excavated in causing disruption as well. Something which was not known at the time. I don't know if it was off-site or the final piece there. The flood action plan, yes, this is a project where we are trying to get the South East Rivers Trust project underway. We're finding a lack of farmers and other landowners to be involved in that, and that's putting the plans for spending further flood action budget into the next year. Also, does that relate to the barrier down there? Separate down there? No.
And just on the other point you've made, Councillor Cooch, there was a report approved by Cabinet, I think it was January last year, which was approving the the lease that has now been agreed with the new tenant, so I'll send a link to that to you.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Yep. Just looked at my notes and Councillor Cooch reminded me. On the flood action plan, so presumably we've got £29,000 to spend, which is the South East Rivers Trust Natural Floodplain Management Project. And it says then that the balance, which is £904,000, there are no other plans to spend this. Now, excuse me, given the climate, is changing and we're experiencing, much more heavy rainfall and deluges than we probably would have historically, I'm just concerned that how can there be no other plans to spend this? I mean, over the last month, a number of flood alerts which come through to my phone from the Environment Agency linked to the Medway, either in the upper bit or the lower bit, let alone the other rivers in the borough. Yeah, I would have thought, I would have thought that's easy, given the cost of any of these sorts of schemes, you could easily spend £1 million on improving flood defence in the borough. And what worries me is if we're sitting at this stage, we don't have any plans to spend money which we need to on flood defence, and by the time you've worked anything up, we'll be, as I say, hitting this embargo, and when we're unable to actually start new schemes. So I, again, would ask, if it's not already in hand, that serious consideration is given to this, because, it's only 2013, not that many years ago, when we had those awful floods at Christmas, half the rural area plus the town were underwater for quite a while. So, yeah, it does worry me. And I suspect the one you've got for the flood barrier, the 402, is going to be spent by whatever unitary we move into, because Kent County Council won't push a scheme forward, we know that. But it needs to remain in the budget, because at some point that flood barrier will be needed. But as I say, it'd really be interesting to know about the what in terms of flood action planning we've got, given the problems we've had in the past and we are forecast to have in the future.
Okay, one thing I can let you know is that I think, as we discussed at a previous cabinet meeting, the EA are putting forward plans for, I think it's 80 properties in Headcorn and 42 in Ulcombe to have property flood resistance in the same, a different manner to what was put in my area of Yolding and Collier Street. We're supporting that, but it's not going to be put in until they've done all the surveys and everything, so it's not going to happen this year. But that's an indication that the Environment Agency are leading a project, but they'd like support from Mason Borough Council on it. That isn't the whole of the 933, but it should save over 100 houses from the threat of imminent flooding from the belt. I don't know if Mark has other comments about the 933.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The history of 933 is, you may remember, Councillor Harper, there was money set aside way back after the floods of 2013-14, when it was thought that there would be a benefit from major infrastructure, some kind of flood barrier in the Tees and Belt area. And it was concluded that that wasn't appropriate, but we've continued to roll that money forward in the capital programme and use it for things like natural flood management wherever the opportunity has presented itself. Frustratingly, the opportunities to do constructive work to mitigate flood risk have been quite limited. Councillor Summerskill's already mentioned the fact that you're dependent on the landowners for permission to build anything on their patch. We've found it really difficult to engage with Kent County Council, as you've noted, on a flood barrier at the bottom of Medway Street. But it's something that, I know members are very keen to progress, and we are looking for any opportunities that that we can take.
If I could just come back on the Medway Street flood barrier, I met with a senior officer at KCC last week, along with Alison Broom and others, and Councillor Harwood, and we were told that the Flood Risk Authority, that is Kent County Council, does not think there is a risk to properties, and had no intention of being active in pushing it forward, which I find utterly astonishing. So I have a letter being formulated in my head that will go back and say, I think you need to really think again. I mean, we're not the Flood Risk Authority, so we have to rely on the others, but the idea that there isn't a risk there is just beggars belief, and that seems to be the key reason it's stalling, because KCC ask us for information, we provide the information, and then they say, no, don't like it, don't believe there's a risk, we want more information, and it's just going backwards and forwards. It's driving me nuts, and it's certainly driving Mr. Green nuts.
Thank you. I apologise for taking up time to make a point rather than ask a question, but I would kick myself if I didn't, which is, could I just really implore that we look again at spending that money, or ask parish councils if there's anything they'd like to spend the money on, because I would hate to sit in a flooded home this Christmas, as we were in 2013, and know that there was £1 million to be spent on flooding, and it wasn't, because that threat is always there on our patch. And we haven't flooded since 2013, which is due to improvements on the lay barrier, etc., but it's not ruled out completely. So yeah, just wanted to add that on. Thank you.
So can I just get this straight? Because I thought this barrier has been talked about since I've been at this council. We've got the money to do it, but KCC say there's no need to do it, so they won't do it.
That's kind of it. Kind of. I mean, I think there's some nuance around that.
Yeah.
It was set aside as part of the gyratory scheme back in 2017, maybe, somewhere around that. Mark's nodding. That's good. I sat there and said, look, it's the last bit of that gyratory scheme. It's needed because the water comes through there and potentially floods lower that area of the Fairway and Medway Street and so forth. And they sat there and said that they don't feel there's a risk. We'll keep pushing, but unless they agree there's a risk, we're not going to get very far.
But wasn't Councillor Harwood in charge of that team when he was at KCC?
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is on page 29, and it's a recommendation for noting. So, so the revenue position as at the end of Q2 for 2025-26, and where significant variances have been identified, be noted, and the capital position at the end of Q2 for 25-26 be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, item number 12. So this is regarding fees and charges for 26-27. This is again going to be presented by Councillor Summerskill.
Yeah, Councillor Cox dipped out at the right time, didn't she? Or ex-Councillor Cox, sorry. Yes, we review the fees and charges, as you know, set by the Council each year. And this report sets out our proposal for fees and charges within this PACS remit. In Appendix A, and the charges for other PACS are also noted in Appendices C and D. The approach taken by officers when determining fees and charges is determined by the policy that's on Appendix B, which makes it clear that cost recovery should be the basis of setting fees and charges. With CPI inflation currently running at 3.6%, but inflation experienced by the Council is higher because payroll cost inflation tends to be higher, and payroll accounts for half of our expended budget. So you'll see that generally fees and charges have been increased in the range of 4 to 5%. Specific factors apply in relation to parking services, where until last year there had been no increase in charges since 2019-20, and it was agreed by the Council last year that there would be a phased return to previous charging levels with an increase of 15% this year and an increase of 12.5% proposed for next year.
Whoops. There we go. Right, Councillor Cooch.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the increases in fees and charges and trust that officers have followed the policy to ensure they're fair. I was just wondering whether there's any kind of impact monitoring or evaluation done, especially around where increasing fees in one area can impact another area of the council. So if it's only a few pounds, but I guess it can make a difference. Things like the increase to bulky waste collections, and we were earlier talking about fly tipping, and whether there's any evaluation done to see whether us putting our prices up in that area increases incidents of fly tipping in another area. And then the same with increase on charges to things like sports pitches, the museum, event, hiring out Jubilee Square, etc. And again, whether these kind of community-based areas, whether it's being monitored that us putting up the prices will reduce usage and kind of push community groups or sports groups, etc., to not operate in those spaces, which can have a knock-on effect on other areas and costs in the council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooch. You're absolutely right. It is one of the factors that officers will consider when looking at fees and charges. So things like sports pitches, in the past we've often just frozen those because we want to maximise usage. I mean, on parking, having talked to the parking service, in spite of putting up parking fees quite substantially last year, they haven't noticed any impact on the level of business in our car park. So it feels as though in that area anyway, the market is quite price insensitive, and although I'm not so close to it, I think they would probably just say the same about bulky waste collection. A difference of £1 or £2 isn't going to make a difference. Unfortunately, the people who do the fly tipping probably would do it anyway, regardless of a few pounds difference on the council's charges. But yes, I can reassure you that we do look at whether the market can bear the increase in fees and charges.
Thank you. So I've got a sort of a packed schedule here. So Councillor Harper, then Councillor Forecast, then Councillor Barfoot, then Councillor Cannon. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, looking at the charges, because I was briefed yesterday in terms of planning and, God, was it strategic planning and Stronger, Healthier Communities Pact, which we're meeting on Thursday. So that brings me on to parking charges. When I was looking at the notes and then looking at the figures of the 15% increase, because at the pack on Thursday we're being told that footfall in the town centre has fallen by 2.1 million visits in half a year, which is a 17% decline. Now, I'm just a bit concerned that if that's the sort of decline we're facing at the moment, it's probably not unusual for retail and town centres at the moment, but if footfall is falling by 17% and we're going to increase our parking charges by 15%, I think we need to understand, and it might be worth perhaps having a briefing note on this, where do our car parking charges sit within the wider scheme of private sector charges such as Le Male and Fremlin Walks? And it may be the reason ours have held up over the last year after the first increase was because we are still cheaper than these other car parks, in which case people would probably prefer to park in ours. But if we're going to increase it by another 15%, it'd be useful to understand where we sit in the market for this. Right, okay, the judge, I assume it would probably still be cheaper, but it's a 17% drop in footfall if that continues, which is what really worries me, because at some point it's going to start to knock through whether we're the cheaper car parks or not, in terms of people coming to the town centre. So that's really, it'd be useful to have, a bit more information, so that when we get at least a budget setting next cycle, we have a bit more assurance, I think, around this, because it is a big increase. The one around Councillor Cooch mentioned about the sort of refuse. I wasn't too clear. I didn't even realise we'd actually stopped doing trade waste. Presumably that was part of the new contract when we went over to Suez, that we stopped the old service. But I'm sure that's an easy one to answer. On the bereavement fee, so on page 65, I noticed that we're looking at a 1,000,000% increase from something being free to charging £500 for interment fees for stillborn to 4-year-olds, and then from 5 to 18-year-old people, a 166% increase. Although in the comments it says that families can reclaim £500 from the Children's Funeral Fund, and I just wanted to check how are they made aware of this Children's Funeral Fund, because incurring those costs when you're looking at losing your children, you're going to be a very awful emotional place. So if there's any difficulty in getting hold of those funds, I'd like to know. And then just finally, I was intrigued on street naming and numbering in paragraph 2.18, because myself and Councillor Millam and Councillor Coates have struggled incredibly hard to get some streets named after local people. We were told to go and find the descendants of people who died 300 or 400 years ago. And as a result, I think we suggested the block of flats which the council's building is called Maidstone Follies, because it's making a fool of us in terms of trying, and now to find that we clearly must probably employ someone because we're collecting in 35,000 quid. I'm wondering why it's down to councillors, that's a separate question, to do all the footwork on that.
Okay, parking charges, I'd refer you back to the previous page 41, where the result of parking services forecast is that we're taking more in, 50,000 more, even with the prices going up. So there's some mismatch between the use and frequent use of parking and your 17% footfall. I don't know the difference between that. On the point about the waste, having had my own bulky waste taken away at 6:30 this morning, I would have paid more than it was for 2 mattresses to go, because the company who supplied the new ones wanted to charge £60, but I'll put that across. The point about the charges for stillborn and 5 to 18 years, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody else here does.
We can find out.
We can find the answer and let you know on that. But there have been several changes up and down on the exclusive rights of burial and the charges. So somebody has really gone to that and worked it out. And yes, yeah, the access of it. Certainly, being on the cemetery subcommittee on my parish, we've had to reassess against the other parishes as well that have their own.
Thank you. I'll just point out that if there is a footfall in the town centre, it doesn't necessarily correlate with parking. I mean, the traffic is absolutely blooming awful, and maybe that's putting people off rather than parking charges. Okay, thank you. Councillor Forecast.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have some concerns about the 15% increase in car parking charges, and I note that the Cabinet member says that actually we're generating more money despite a decrease in footfall, but I am concerned that if you increase something too much and you stretch people and you put so much financial pressure on them that they will eventually just stop coming to the town centre, and I would worry about the impact on businesses, etc. So I do think, Councillor Harper, your suggestion about seeing where this increase compares in terms of private parking provision locally would be good to see. I am also slightly confused, or perhaps you can explain why parking is going up 15%, despite you mentioned that inflation is obviously significantly lower.
What was the last point? Why it's gone up 15%?
Of course, why is it going up 15%? I mean, where's that number come from?
Yep. I think, as I explained, the prices hadn't risen since 2020, and we decided last year there would be a phased return to the same level, given prices generally had gone up 25%. So we put it 15% last year, and then this year's 12.5%, because the rates have gone up to effectively 115% of what they were before. So it's a lower percentage.
So just to clarify, you're trying to get it up to what it would have increased from 2020? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Forecast has just really reiterated what I wanted to just clarify about this parking. I do have concerns, because I think just because people are paying it, it doesn't mean it's necessarily justified that we should charge them more. And I think things are really, I mean, I just walked past Claire's Accessories. That's just poof, gone. And I really think we should be doing everything we can to encourage people to come into the town centre. Now, I know we can have all these discussions about, well, we don't want people coming in cars, and I get that, but there is no alternative at the moment. There is no transport from, you know, if I wanted to come from my house in Marden by public transport, I'd have to walk down to Marden, get on the train out to somewhere, and then come back in. It's just not possible. And I think we should be doing everything we can to try and support our town centre. So I think just because we think perhaps people will still continue to pay it, it doesn't necessarily make it right. I think the point that Councillor Couch made about the fly tipping, I just wanted to come back on that. I think you're either the kind of person that fly tips or you're not. I don't think a few pounds here and there is really going to make a difference. I mean, I wouldn't fly tip in a million years, and I just wouldn't do it. It doesn't matter how much it would cost me to get rid of something, we wouldn't. So I don't think that is a particular issue. But like I say, it just comes back to me, the parking and the concerns there. And I do think Councillor Harper made some good points regarding that money that can be claimed back, and I really think that we should be making sure that we're signposting in the crematorium or when people are coming there to make sure that they're aware that that is the case. Because I mean, you know, as parents, I couldn't imagine anything worse than burying a child, and I just think we want to make that as painless as we possibly can. So if that money is there, we really want to make sure that people are accessing it. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think the funeral directors will be signposting people adequately, but we will make sure that it is known across the board with them.
Thank you. And Councillor Callan.
Thank you. To add to the parking element, I'm strongly against increasing the parking, and I think it's a great shame you're undermining the previous administration's freeze on parking. I think a point of clarity I would like to know on, you said that the revenue is still good from parking, people are paying it. You introduced payments, parking charges for electric vehicles. So do you know whether it's just that you're now capturing that aspect of revenue from electric vehicles, and that's what's inflating the figure. And then also, you're increasing parking charges overnight. And so, off the top of my head, overnight parking in Lock Meadow, Medway Street, I mean, this is actually hitting residents who have cars in flats around there. So, while we might think it's just about talk about the visitors coming to Maidstone, actually overnight parking in Lock Meadow, Medway Street, all the sort of areas which are surrounded by flats, it is residents that are parking there overnight in many cases. So I wouldn't support that, and it's also a shame to see Moat Park is proposed as increased again as well, because we should be encouraging people to go to Moat Park. So those are my observations on parking, and if you could also get back on the point about introducing electric charging for electric vehicles as to whether that is what is actually boosting the number.
I don't know the answer to the EV one, and I will get information on that and get that back to you. The overnight charge of off-street car parks, apart from Lock Meadow, is significantly lower. It's just if Lock Meadow is the one that people choose, there are other areas that they could park and pay £2.60, or have an off-street parking evening parking permit as well.
Thank you. Councillor Gooch.
I just wanted to come back on fly tipping really quickly, and it may be my misunderstanding, and that's why I've requested the paper on fly tipping to know what's going on. But I thought I'd been told by officers when asking about the causes of fly tipping is that it's often, it's not that normal people are going, oh, it's too expensive to have my bulky waste taken, so I'm going to fly tip, but that's what leads them to use unlicensed waste carriers, who are the ones who are then doing the fly tipping because they charge less because they just dump it. So that was that point, but look forward to seeing the report so we can all understand it better. And then on parking, I guess in a similar vein to what's already been said, is just how the increases are going to be communicated to residents, and what information is going out about alternatives to parking in town, the public transport that is available where it is available, and making sure residents understand the decisions we're making rather than just putting the prices up and hoping no one notices, because they will. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gooch. I think that's a very good point, and we'll talk to the comms team about that. Can I just come back on Councillor Cannon's point on residents parking overnight? The charge is £90. It's not going up. We've not increased that one, so residents won't be any worse off.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a question picking up on what Councillor Cannon said, but I think I've seen the answer on page 73, if I'm not mistaken, because it seems to say there that the evening any car park off-street valid after 5 and before 8, Monday to Sunday for 12 months. That's £90 now, and it's remaining at £90, isn't it? Which is good. A year, yeah, sorry, for the year, because a lot of people in my ward have no off-street park. Well, I would say actually the bulk of the people in my ward don't have off-street parking, and some of them I know would make use of potentially park a street car park. And I'm sure a lot of residents in the High Street ward will be using a lot of our car parks at night time. So a £90 charge for the year is one I think we need to keep it probably frozen for as long as there's a Maidstone Borough Council, because it's increasingly difficult to park your car. So I'm glad to see that you're not increasing that. So I just wondered who you tend to capture by other overnight parking, other than residents. What other sort of people tend to park in our car park? Because if they actually do it any frequency, they look at the charging schedule and go and buy themselves a season ticket and do it.
Just to note that fee, £90, was reduced last year as a quid pro quo in some ways.
Okay, thank you. So we're asked recommendations on page 55. So I'll take them one at a time. So the first recommendation is the contents be noted. So we'll just keep it as that. The content be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 2, the fees and charges as detailed in Appendix A for the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services Policy Advisory Committee be approved. Is that agreed? Okay. So we're going to go to the vote for that.
Is there a consensus in the room, I would say? So if there's not a consensus, you can do a vote if you want.
Okay, let's just take it as a vote then. So in votes in favour? Votes against? Abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Number 3, the fees and charges in Appendix B be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. And number 4, the fees and charges noted in Appendix C and for the other policy advisory committees be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So, item number 13, our last item of the evening. Is the council tax reduction scheme, and this is going to be introduced again by Councillor Summerskill.
Good job I had my dinner before I came out, I guess. So in July this year, the Cabinet approved a consultation on potential changes to the Council's council tax reduction scheme to be effective from April 2026. This report sets out the results of that consultation and makes recommendations for changes, because each year the Council has to approve the council tax reduction scheme for the following year, so it can be changed year on year. Our current scheme offers an 80% maximum reduction in council tax, which benefits 4,811 of the total of 6,919 working age claimants council tax reduction scheme. More generous schemes are becoming increasingly common throughout England, and we expect a number of other districts in Kent to increase the maximum reduction in council tax to 100% this coming year. And an overview of the national position is in Appendix 1. The consultation we carried out indicated 50% support for an increase in the maximum reduction, of which 68% of the consultees supported an increase to 100%. They were given an option of 100% or 90%. The details of that consultation are in Appendix 2. This report recommends a maximum reduction of 100% and an increase in the other bands of the current system, bands 2 to 5, by 10%. Other changes recommended are to align the percentage support for all claimants. Disabled claimants formerly received an additional 5%. To increase the thresholds in the banding system by inflation, and to disregard certain compensation payments in order to be consistent with the Department of Works and Pension. Overall, this will cost the Council £182,000, which will be taken into account as part of the budget setting process. We believe that these changes would address poverty and thereby help deliver the key strategic priority of building resilient communities. Preceptors would be adversely affected financially by these changes, and they do not support this increase in the maximum reduction. The responses of KCC, the Fire Authority and the Police Commissioner are summarised in the report and set out in Appendices 3 to 5. This report seeks to address fully the issues that they raised on pages 114 and 115.
Thank you. Councillor Parfitt was first.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I was just intrigued to know, because I went through this process with Mark when I was the Cabinet member, and it was very much considered that actually, because we did model that, the increase to 100%, and it was very much deemed that it would not really be financially possible. And I suppose I'm intrigued to know what has changed that this is now the recommendation coming forward. I mean, I think points 2 through to 5 make sense to me, but this increase to 100%, and I wonder how that will align with authorities that we might potentially be merging with local government reorganisation, and obviously the impact it has on the Fire Authority, the Kent Police and Kent County Council, because I might have misunderstood. 182,000, that is not the cost to us, is it? That is the cost, that's the reduction in the base. The actual cost to us would be less than 182. Am I right?
The 182 is the cost directly to Maidstone. The overall cost is shared between us and the preceptors, but the 182 is.
So it's actually worse than I thought. Sorry, I was thinking, oh well, 182,000, and we have a percentage of that, therefore it might be nearer in the sort of 20s, but it is 182,000 pounds. Obviously, I think we all recognise that times have changed. Cost of living, you know, is affecting absolutely everybody. But I just wonder where that money is coming from, and, you know, has Mark found a load of money down the back of the sofa that wasn't there when I was in the cabinet? Thank you.
It's part of the budget setting for next year is considering if and where that would be changing. And I did mention that it can be changed and should be looked at each year. So when we come into the other authorities, if they've changed theirs or not, they may want to change, the new authority may want to change it for their first financial year. So we are not only looking at next year's for us and not tying ourselves to that every year. Noted.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick question, which is, if KCC say no, what happens then? Do we have to pay KCC a portion towards? Yeah. Okay.
It's our decision.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
I agree with many of the consultees. I'm quite concerned about this whole exercise, and I actually will propose, after I finish speaking, that we actually go back out for public consultation. The Police Crime Commissioner highlights that the consultation didn't make clear that the cost of this is borne by all taxpayers. That's also in the feedback from KCC, and it's referenced in the Fire and Rescue Service Authority letter as well. So I think if these bodies don't want to do this, we should actually take note of that. And they've also raised a problem with the consultation and how residents were informed and the things within that. And I would also add, from my own observation on page 171, that 57% of respondents to the survey that quoted are economically inactive. So I think, considering the feedback from the consultees saying that there are flaws in the consultation, we actually need to get more economically active people feeding back into this consultation, as they're the ones that are bearing the cost, as in the 3 other letters that we've received. I think that's fundamentally flawed. So, I mean, I would propose that this goes back to consultation so that we can get some proper information.
So is that seconded? Okay, so that's seconded by Councillor Forecast.
I don't know, we'll talk about the amendment now. Yeah, so we're now talking about the amendment and what's on the papers now.
Okay. So the amendment then is to send it back for consultation.
Yeah, so we're now having a debate on that subject.
Okay. So we're now having a debate on that subject. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. If we were to approve the amendment and then the Cabinet were to also endorse it, and then then the Council decided to go out to consultation again, we wouldn't be able to agree a scheme in time, would we, for doing the council tax next year? I'm just trying to think, because us then going to cabinet going out consultation, the response then coming back. I'm trying to understand in my head, is there time to actually do that, given we're sitting here in the beginning of December? Perhaps the officers might be able to answer.
It would be close on time. What I would say was 10,000 emails went out to the people that are on the consultation list for Maidstone. So we got just over 600 responses. A lot of people chose not to respond to that consultation. They were all sent details of it. And so if we went back out to consult again, we may get the same result again, because obviously people that are in receipt of benefit are more likely to respond to it because they're more affected by it. But there was an awful lot of people who asked for their views on it and didn't respond.
Thank you. I'm going to try and weave the point I was originally going to make into the debate on the amendment, but I guess it's worth pointing out that the consultation, the decision to go to consultation and what should go in the consultation came to this committee originally, so we had an opportunity to inform that. However, I'm now realising, I wonder how clear we are about the impact of local government reorganisation in that consultation, because it has occurred to me that and I don't know if this is right or wrong, and I wonder if officers could provide more information, that if we were to approve this, and I am supportive of it in principle, and we remove council tax for a significant number of people, when that's no longer in our control and is potentially reintroduced, are we putting people under more financial pressure because they've been relieved of X amount per year? They're going to allocate that to other spending, and then in a year, 18 months, 3 years, that's going to be likely going to be reintroduced for them, and whether that's as dangerous thing to do as it would be to not. But I don't know. Thank you.
When you consider this, we obviously don't know what the authority will look like yet, but if, for example, we went to West Kent, Maidstone has the highest council tax, so it will be, when you look at other examples like North Yorkshire, which was much smaller than we are as an area, but the authority with the highest council tax had a 100% scheme, and the authority with the lowest council tax had an 80% scheme. And so as part of the equalisation of council tax, they decided in that case that the council with the lowest council tax would move up to a 100% scheme, because that was fairer on the people on low incomes, that their council tax wouldn't increase so much. So it may not work out like that in this area, but I think when we get to a new authority, that is the sort of discussions they'll be having, and it wouldn't necessarily be that the scheme would change straight away.
Yeah, I think where I come from on this, in principle, I'm not opposed to the 100%, because unquestionably there will be people that need this and deserve it and will benefit from it. I absolutely believe that. My concern is, with the reorganisation, the changes that are coming down the line, we could be putting people, as Grace just said there, we could be putting people in a situation where we make them better off and then we take it away again. And I just think there's too much uncertainty to make this kind of change. it's really hard to explain. So, yeah, in principle, I understand why you want to do it, and I agree, but I'm worried about the impact it's going to have down the line. That's probably not very helpful, but...
Councillor Cannon.
I mean, on the amendment, the PCC, Police Crime Commissioner, and the Fire Authority, they do mention also this point, that the actual consultation hasn't made that clear to residents either. So residents actually haven't been that hasn't been put to them, that, you know, we might be giving it and then a new authority would take it away. You know, that's something that we should have public consultation on. And I'd like to just highlight again 178, which is the Police Crime Commissioner's letter. He says, respondents have not been asked whether they support a greater share of council tax they pay being used to support those on low incomes and not on much needed services. So I think, you know, we've got to reconsult the public, because that is incredibly significant.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, it's just worth pointing out, whilst, I mean, I know people are trying to second guess what would happen with the new unitary, but you could make the same case about, even if LGR wasn't happening, you know, there would be potentially a change in administration in 2 years, 2.5 years anyway. So it kind of could change no matter what happens, whether there's LGR or not. I think that might be a bit of a red herring. So just to point out that. The verbal information I had back, I think it was from the monitor officer and via another officer, was that our consultation was sound, and the challenges from other authorities weren't felt to be material.
Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you. I'd just like to make one final point, because one of the I am concerned as well about the impact that this will have on Kent Police, because I know when I had to go and sit on the police crime panel, their revenue budget is literally stretched. They are not getting enough money from the fair funding scheme that isn't particularly fair funding, or whatever it's called. They are really struggling to just keep their to pay their wage bill with the amount of money that they get. And I know that it's quite a while back, but the pressure on their budget is extreme, and we will be compounding that by any decision we make.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
I just feel if people are at home watching this, which I doubt they are, but if they were and they were on low income, they would want 100% reduction now and worry about the future when the future comes, because as you say, none of us have got a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in a year, 18 months' time. But if people are watching this and know of our debate, I'd think, how dare you? You know, I want 100% in my pocket now, not worrying about other things. I think that the full discount should be awarded without doubt.
Councillor Harper.
Well, are we just commenting on the amendment? Okay, well, I'll wait until the amendment's been voted on, then I'll raise my point.
I have a quick question, and I'm probably way behind the times here, but didn't there used to be council tax benefit that was, and is that rolled into universal credit? So is there an amount of the money that people get that's actually supposed to be for council tax? It's just a question.
Council tax benefit ended on the 31st of March 2013. So since then we've had this scheme, and so that's when it stopped people automatically getting 100% support towards their council tax.
Thank you. Right, so should we vote on the amendment? So the amendment is to send it back out to consultation. Yep. Okay, so all those in favour? That's 3. Those against? Okay, so that is that falls. Okay, thank you. So back to the original. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. I think the answer to Councillor Parfitt-Reed's question was how much is this going to cost in total? It's actually is on page 110 in the table. So if we agree the 100%, it's going to cost Kent County Council just over £1 million. The Police Commission 163,000, the Fire Brigade 57, and us 182. So a total of just over £1.4 million. And if we had gone to, as you can see on the table, if we went to 90%, that figure from 1.4 would drop to 831. But I think on balance, I'm supportive of moving to 100%. I work in the, well, I'm about to retire from it, but I work in the benefits sector. We are living in really harsh times for people. I mean, you know, thankfully the government last week lifted the 2-child cap and hopefully, you know, starting towards a slightly better approach to welfare benefits. But I think, as was pointed out during the sort of debate in Parliament, whenever anyone suggests increasing welfare benefits, it's in terms of public consultation, you're never likely to get a massive flood of people saying this is a good idea, because most people aren't on welfare benefits and don't understand the impact. But the impact of someone of £10 a week can really be significant. So if we can do this, we can help. I don't know, I'm sure the numbers there, a certain number of people in the borough, and even if it's only just for 2 years, it's better than not doing it at all. And actually, the only thing I would ask is, I was looking on the maps on 128 and 129. My impression is if we go to 100%, as is recommended, looks like we're the only Kent authority doing it, because it didn't look like there's any other. On page 129, the nearest to us is Rother District Council in East Sussex, and looks like Hastings Borough Council on the other maps. So I just wanted to check if we've got information as to what do our neighbours do, and do any of them actually do 100%? And my final, and the question I was a bit stuck on paragraph 313, and this is about the DWP thresholds, because in paragraph 314 we're listing a number of compensation benefits, and I wasn't too clear. If you receive, for instance, vaccine damage payments or the Horizon Post Office compensation payments, do those get considered in a, I suppose, in a positive or negative way? I mean, I would be concerned on us agreeing to do what's said there, if it meant that a postmaster or mistress in the borough would find that their compensation, when we're working out whether they're entitled to 100% relief, you know, we take into account them receiving that compensation, because that compensation is for a lifetime of agony, as is some of these other items here. So I just really wanted to understand how that worked.
So first of all, the 100% schemes. So currently, the following authorities, nobody in Kent awards 100% at the moment. Currently, a number of 8 or 9 authorities have been out to consult. It's likely the following are going to consider 100%. Thanet, possibly Canterbury and Dover. Folkestone and Hythe are about to go to their cabinet on a 100% scheme. Swale are going with a report for a 100% scheme. Gravesham are going to recommend a 100% scheme. And Ashford, I heard today, are likely to go to a 90% scheme, possibly not a 100% scheme. With our neighbours, Tunbridge and Malling haven't gone to a 100% scheme or gone out to consult on it. because they had a change in the Director of Finance and the Revenues Manager, so they decided for this year not to go out and consult for that reason. Sevenoaks haven't consulted, but may be considering it for next year. Tunbridge Wells have decided that they will be sticking with an 80% scheme for this year, but if there's changes in West Kent, they will consider it again next year. And yep, so DWP, so with the council tax support schemes, because we have to design our own schemes, we're always behind. The DWP always announce when we've already got our schemes in what they're doing, so we're always behind on it. So the DWP are disregarding these compensation amounts. So if you get £40,000, let's say, because our capital limit is for working age people £10,000, we'd say you're not entitled at all. So what we're asking is to disregard the compensation in line with the DWP.
Thank you. Any other? Okay, Councillor Forecast.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. A specific concern that I personally have on this, and I recognise that we want to help some of the lower incomes in the borough, but I don't personally feel comfortable increasing the support from 20% for those who are not working, and then offering a smaller amount of support to those who are trying to do the right thing by turning up to work and going to a place of employment. I think, like always, the problem with increasing welfare benefits, such as this, is someone does foot that cost, and taxpayers in Maidstone are also subject to cost of living pressures, and I don't think they should be having to pick up this bill just because they're going to work and doing their best. So that's my view on it. I appreciate it's not going to be shared by the cabinet, but I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendations on page 104, I will take them in bulk rather than read them out. So are the recommendations agreed? Vote. Yep, okay. So all those in favour of accepting those recommendations? And those against? And abstentions? Thank you. They are accepted. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for a lovely evening. I now declare the meeting closed.